Hey everybody, this is Chris Addick from the Veterans Law Blog. I wanted to pop up here today and talk to you a little bit about TDIU. So most of you know what this benefit is. It's total disability based on individual unemployability, and it's available to veterans in certain fact situations. So the first situation that you can get this benefit is if you are unable to get or keep substantially gainful employment because of your service-connected disability, then you're eligible for TDIU. Now, where do you learn about TDIU? Well, you can start to learn about it in the regulation that defines it, and that's 38 CFR 4.16. This is a fascinating benefit because it's not one that was specifically authorized by Congress. The VA put it into the regulations all on their own. So it was what started out as a good idea has become more and more complicated. And I'm going to talk to you about a huge wrinkle improving TDIU as we talk about this here today in this short little episode. So, bottom line, if you cannot get and keep substantially gainful employment because of your service-connected disabilities, you are eligible for a total disability based on individual unemployability rating of 100%. What does that mean? Two ways you can get there. First way is 4.16a. That's the regulation, and it says that if you've got certain ratings or they combine to certain numbers, then you're eligible, and all you have to do is show that you cannot get and keep substantially gainful activity. What are those numbers? One disability at 60%, more than one disability with a total impairment rating greater than 70%, and one at least 40%. All right, I call that the 60, 70, 40 rule. You can read all about it on the Veterans Law Blog. Just get on there and search TDIU eligibility, and you'll get a bunch of posts that'll talk you through all that sort of stuff. So another way you can do it is if you don't have those ratings, if you don't have a single 60% rating or a combined 70 with at least one at 40%, you can still get TDIU. And all you have to show is that your service-connected disability, whatever it is, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, whatever number, if that impairs you such that you cannot get and keep substantially gainful employment because of that disability, then you're entitled to TDIU, or at least eligible for it. And so we've talked about that at other times, about what it takes to get that, what's called extra scheduler TDIU. That's the one that you don't have to have a particular rating. It's a little bit tougher proof, and it's a different proof. But I wanted you to know that TDIU does not necessarily require you to have certain ratings. If you can't get and keep work, substantially gainful work, because of your service-connected disability or disabilities, you are eligible for TDIU. So, I've said that phrase, and you've heard it a dozen times here already, substantially gainful activity or substantially gainful employment. What do those words mean? Well, that's funny that you ask. Well, you didn't ask, I asked, and I answered. So funny that I asked. But in any event, it's late in the day, it's been a long day, so I apologize for being a little bit goofy here. But substantially gainful activity is not defined, at least not in veterans law, right? So Social Security disability has a simple definition for a term, very similar concept and a very simple definition. And I've got blog posts that share what that is. We're not going to go into it here because I don't want to confuse things any more than they already are. So, but the VA has never defined what it means to have substantially gainful employment, right? So we know, there's one way we know for a fact, and this goes back, 25 years ago. There's a court case that kind of looked at this and made some deductive logic or deductive reasoning, and found that if your income is at or below federal poverty guidelines, that is most clearly not substantially gainful employment, okay? Those guidelines are updated every year. You can get them online. You can go to, I think it's Department of Health and Human Services publishes them. I think this year, 2018. They haven't come out with 19 that I'm aware of, but 2018, that number for a single veteran with no children, no dependents would be $12,400 a year. If you make $12,400 a year or less, and your service-connected disabilities prevent you from earning more than that, you're entitled to TDIU, okay? That's one way we know for sure that you can clearly show that you cannot get and keep substantially gainful employment, is that at or below federal poverty guidelines. And those guidelines change depending on the size of your family. So if you've got a spouse and 5 kids, it's going to be a little bit higher poverty guideline level. It's not significant. They're absurdly low numbers, and I look at these numbers and I just don't know how anybody survives on that kind of income. It just boggles my mind that we set things that low or set the bar that low. That's another story for another day. Back to the issue of substantially gainful employment. What if you make more than those guidelines? Does that mean you're not eligible for TDIU? It does not mean that. Does not mean that. In fact, I have gone on the record saying that I believe that you don't need to actually, your TDIU eligibility is not dependent on a certain income level, right? I've told folks that in certain situations you can make pretty significant amounts of money in a job, but because your service-connected disabilities interfere with your ability to get substantially gainful employment, then you'd be eligible for TDIU. And that's because it's not defined. This term is not defined. And we know, going back to 1991, that the Veterans Court said they are not going to get involved in this. They said in 1991, 1991, what was going on then? George H.W. Bush was president, right? Berlin Wall had just fallen 2 years ago. Here's my favorite thing from 1991. The Hubble telescope had just launched into outer space. Between 1991 and today, the Hubble telescope has circled the Earth 3 billion miles. They've gone 3 billion miles. So in that time, the court and the VA has still refused to define substantially gainful employment. So you could walk 3 billion miles and you probably will never see a definition from them. So in any event, the thing that, kind of getting off on a rabbit trail there, but 1991, the court said, we're not going to define it. We need the VA to define that, and then we'll review it to make sure it's reasonable. Well, the VA came back and said, well, we're not going to define it. It's our regulation, and we really prefer that it's vague and cryptic. So we're not going to define it. So we've had this stalemate for going on more than a quarter century. And that stalemate has continued and continued. And time and again, veterans appeal to the court and ask the court to please define this term, because we don't know what to prove. We don't know what we have to prove to show a veteran can or cannot get and keep substantially gainful employment, because there's no real standard. So it's basically like you just take a big bowl of spaghetti and throw it up on the wall and see what sticks, right? If something sticks, you're good. Now, it opens the door to all sorts of discriminatory treatment, frankly. You might get a rater that doesn't like black veterans and so doesn't find you eligible. You might get a rater that thinks that this era modern veterans are wimps and that they didn't go through what they went through in other eras. They might not give you TDIU. You might get an employee at the VA that thinks, you know what, I think this is a ridiculous benefit. I don't think anybody should get these benefits. I'm going to deny it. And they don't have any standards, so they can do that. Well, they probably can't if they put that in writing. They're not going to put that in writing, though, right? They're going to go ahead and say you're not eligible. They don't have a standard. There's nothing to gauge it by, so you're kind of out in the woods. So what do you do? What do you do when you're in this situation where we know for a fact that the VA is not going to define this term, and we know for a fact that the court is not going to define this term, right? What do? We want, when we're proving up TDIU, if we have income from employment that's greater than those poverty guidelines, we want to focus on really what our disability does to our ability to work, right? The symptoms and the limitations from our disability and their impact on our ability to do a job or a class of jobs. And we want to focus on something else too. We want to focus on how our disability or the symptoms and limitations from it limit our ability to get an income from working, right? We all know what that first one is. That makes sense. If you have, I don't know, if you've had knee surgery and lost the ability to use your left leg, you certainly can describe pretty easily how that impacts your ability to do a job, particularly if it's a job that's not one that requires you to sit at a desk. That said, the other side of that, we don't always know how to prove how our disabilities, symptoms, and limitations affect our ability to earn an income, right? That's different from doing the job, right? Let me give you an example. Here's a veteran, has skin cancer. Let's say you have skin cancer, been diagnosed with it, you're unable to, I guess the max rating, I think, for most skin cancer is going to be probably, I think it's 100% until the treatment stops, and then it drops back down, and it's rated based on a bunch of criteria. There's no set rating. It's based on scars, disfigurement, and what's the other thing? Functional impairment. And so you're going to prove all that stuff up. You're probably not going to get to 60% with it, but you're going to have this skin cancer. Let's say that your job is outdoors. Let's say you're an outdoor construction worker, or let's say you have your own business and your own business doing lawn care, right? That's the fact scenario. How do you prove that your skin cancer is interfering with your ability to do your job? That's straightforward, right? You can talk about how the physical limitations, you can talk about the workload that you have to do and exert at work and your ability and inability to do it. How do you prove you can't get an income? Well, I'll tell you one way is, let's say you are getting treated for skin cancer. Most of the treatments are sunlight sensitive, so if you go out in the sunlight, you risk some pretty severe side effects, if not making things a whole lot worse. And so a lot of times when you're getting treated for skin cancer, and frankly, for years after that treatment, you're told to limit your time in the sun, right? And so if you own a lawn care business, as a veteran, you started up this whole business, you're doing great things, you're having this great business, you're diagnosed with skin cancer, and all of a sudden you can't go outside and work. Your ability, you can do the job, you can get out there and you can push the equipment that needs to be pushed, you can make the sales that need to be made, you can do all those things, but you can't go outside to do the work because of your skin cancer. And that's what limits your income. It limits your ability to earn that income. So, and that's actually a true story from a veteran. So it's and that's a good point. It's very easy to see in that case. There's all sorts of different examples that get more and more difficult. So spend some time thinking about it. Sit down and write 2 columns on a piece of paper and write down, in one column, how does this physically limit my ability? This condition that I have, how does it physically limit my ability to get and keep a job, right? And then on the other side, I want you to sit down and think about how it limits your ability to get an income. If you didn't have those limitations, if you didn't have those symptoms, what income do you think you'd be earning? You're not going to put all this in paper for the VA. This is for you to figure out, because you have to figure out how to prove that, because there's no standard. So I want you to sit down and I want you to think, you know what, if I didn't have this limitation, if I wasn't held back by the symptoms and limitations of PTSD, what income would I be earning? What am I trained to do? What's my occupational history? What have I gone to school for? What do I have experience in? What do I have some sort of tendency to do, or some sort of skill set or ability to do it? Those are the things you want to think about. And if you don't have those because of your disability, they're not physical limitations. Those are income earning limitations, right?